On Christmas, I went to grab a glass for a toast, and my daughter shouted in front of everyone, "The toast is just for family, Mom. Use your old cup." I walked out and left my gift card on her chair. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. I adjusted my pearl earrings one last time before ringing the doorbell of my daughter Zoey's sprawling suburban home. The Christmas wreath on the door mocked me with its perfect symmetry and carefully placed red velvet bow. I shifted the weight of the gift bags in my arms and took a deep breath. 72 days. That's how long it had been since I'd last seen my only child. The door swung open, revealing my daughter's picture-perfect smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mom, you're early," Zoey said, glancing at her watch. I wasn't. The invitation clearly said 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was 5:05. But I'd learned not to correct her. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I said, leaning in for a hug that turned into an awkward shoulder pat from her. I stepped into the foyer, hit by the overwhelming scent of cinnamon and pine. The house was immaculate as always, a showcase home where nothing seemed lived in, not even by the 2 grandchildren I barely knew anymore. "The others are already in the living room," Zoey said, taking the gifts from my arms and placing them under the tree without looking at the tags. The others consisted of Zoey's husband Richard, his parents, his sister's family, and a couple I didn't recognize. As I entered, conversations dimmed. Richard's mother, Patricia, gave me that same look she'd been giving me for 20 years, the one that said I didn't quite belong in their circle. "Joyce, Merry Christmas," Richard called out too loudly, as if announcing me to the room. He didn't get up from his armchair. I settled into the only empty seat, a hardback chair in the corner, separated from the semicircle of plush couches where everyone else sat. My grandchildren, Emma and Lucas, barely looked up from their tablets to acknowledge me. Throughout dinner, I tried to participate in conversations that seemed to flow around me like water around a stone. Every time I spoke, someone would politely nod, then quickly redirect the discussion to topics I had no context for, people I didn't know, events I hadn't been invited to. "Remember that wonderful weekend at the lake house this summer?" Patricia asked the table. "The sunset boat ride was just magical." I didn't remember because I hadn't been there. I carefully cut my turkey into smaller pieces, focusing on my plate to hide the hurt in my eyes. When dessert was finished, Richard stood up, clinking his spoon against his crystal glass. "I think it's time for a toast," he announced, "to family and another blessed year." I rose with everyone else, moving toward the sideboard where the champagne flutes were arranged. I reached for one the same way everyone else was doing. That's when it happened. "The toast is just for family, Mom," Zoey said sharply, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Use your old cup." The room fell silent. I stood there, champagne flute in hand, feeling the weight of a dozen eyes on me. My old cup was a faded plastic tumbler I'd been given for water at the beginning of the meal, nothing like the gleaming crystal everyone else held. Slowly, I placed the flute back on the tray. My hands trembled slightly, but I forced a smile. "Of course, dear," I said quietly. Richard's mother gave Zoey a small approving nod, and the conversations resumed as if nothing had happened. But something had shattered inside me, something I didn't think could break any further. I slipped away from the gathering, retrieving my purse and the last gift I hadn't placed under the tree, an envelope containing a card with something special inside. I placed it gently on Zoey's empty dining chair, where she would find it later. Without saying goodbye, I put on my coat and stepped out into the cold December night. No one noticed my departure. No one called after me. As I drove home alone on Christmas night, streetlights blurring through my tears, I wondered when exactly I had stopped being family to my own daughter. Was it when Richard came into her life 15 years ago? Was it when I couldn't afford to contribute to their lavish wedding? Or was it 1,000 tiny moments of exclusion that had built up over the years like sediment, eventually hardening into stone? My phone rang just as I pulled into my driveway. Zoey's name flashed on the screen, her first call to me in months. Her voice came through, broken and tearful. "Mom? What is this? I found your card. Why would you do this?" I sat in my silent car, the engine off, the cold seeping in, and listened to my daughter cry. I didn't answer Zoey's call that night. For the first time in my life, I couldn't find the strength to comfort her when she was upset. Instead, I sat in my darkened living room, Christmas tree lights blinking in silence, and let the memories wash over me. 28 years ago, when Robert died suddenly of a heart attack, Zoey was only 12. I was 41, a widow with a mortgage, a child to raise, and a part-time job at the library that barely covered groceries. I still remember the night I sat at our kitchen table, bills spread out before me, realizing Robert's life insurance wouldn't last more than a year. The next day, I took a second job waiting tables at Denny's. I worked mornings at the library, evenings at the restaurant, and collapsed into bed each night with my feet throbbing. But Zoey never went without. She still had her dance lessons, her school trips, her birthday parties with friends. "Mom, why don't you ever come to my recitals anymore?" she'd asked once, her young face scrunched in confusion. I couldn't tell her it was because I was working double shifts to keep our lives afloat. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I promise I'll make the next one." I rarely did. Those hours were precious dollars we needed. When college acceptance letters came, Zoey got into her dream school, a private university with a price tag that made my stomach clench. The night she showed me the letter, her eyes bright with hope, I knew what I had to do. "We'll make it work," I told her, hugging her tight. I sold our family home, the one Robert and I had bought as newlyweds, the one with Zoey's height marks on the kitchen doorframe. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment and used every penny from the sale to fund her education. "Mom, this place is so small," Zoey had said when she first visited, her voice tinged with embarrassment. "It's cozy," I corrected her. "And it's just me now." During her junior year, Zoey met Richard. Handsome, ambitious, from a wealthy family. Everything I should have wanted for my daughter. The first time she brought him home to my small apartment, I saw him taking in my shabby furniture, the water stain on the ceiling, the mismatched dishes. "Your mother is resourceful," he'd said to Zoey later, thinking I couldn't hear from the kitchen. After they married, the invitations to family events became less frequent. Richard's parents hosted holidays in their sprawling home. My handmade gifts looked pitiful next to their extravagant offerings. Gradually, I became an afterthought, invited out of obligation, seated far from my daughter at gatherings, my opinions and stories politely ignored. When Emma was born, I offered to watch her while Zoey returned to work. "That's sweet, Mom, but we've hired a nanny," Zoey had said. "She's trained in early childhood development." The unspoken message was clear. I wasn't good enough, not educated enough, not refined enough to care for my own grandchild. Still, I persisted. I sent cards, made calls, showed up when invited. I held on to hope that someday my daughter would see me, really see me again. My phone rang again, pulling me from my memories. Zoey calling for the third time. Picked up. "Mom." Her voice was hoarse. "Why aren't you answering? What is this card supposed to mean?" I closed my eyes, picturing the card I'd left. Inside was a check for $50,000, nearly every penny I had saved over the past 20 years, tucked away for emergencies. Along with it, a simple note. For my daughter, who was always my family even when I wasn't hers. "It means exactly what it says, Zoey," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "But this is so much money. Is this some kind of guilt trip? Are you trying to make me feel bad about the toast comment?" "It was just a stupid moment, Mom." "No, Zoey. It wasn't just a moment. It was the moment I finally understood where I stand." "Where you stand?" She sounded genuinely confused. "What are you talking about? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When did you last ask how I was doing? Do you even know if I'm happy, if I'm healthy, if I'm lonely?" Silence stretched between us. "That money was supposed to be my safety net," I continued. "But I realize now I've been saving it for you anyway. For if you ever needed me. Take it. Consider it my last gift as your mother." "Last gift? You're being dramatic." Zoey's voice hardened. "This is Richard's influence, isn't it? He says you've always been bitter about our success." My heart cracked further. Even now she couldn't see the truth. "I'm not bitter about your success, Zoey. I'm heartbroken that it came at the cost of our relationship." "We have a relationship," she insisted. "You're just difficult sometimes. You make Richard's family uncomfortable." "By existing?" I asked quietly. Another pause. "I'm coming over tomorrow. We need to talk about this in person." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there in the dark, wondering what there was left to say after all these years. The check wasn't meant to buy my daughter's love, or punish her for her treatment of me. It was surrender. My final acknowledgement that no matter what I sacrificed, I would never truly be part of her family again. I barely slept that night. The conversation with Zoey played on repeat in my mind as I moved around my small kitchen the next morning, mechanically making coffee. The Christmas tree I had decorated alone 3 weeks ago stood in the corner, its lights off. A few wrapped presents for grandchildren who barely knew me still nestled underneath. At precisely 10 o'clock in the morning, a knock came at my door. Zoey never was late, a trait she'd inherited from her father. I opened the door to find my daughter standing there, impeccably dressed even on the day after Christmas, her camel coat buttoned against the cold, her hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail. Her eyes were slightly red, the only indication of her emotional state. "May I come in?" she asked formally, as if visiting a stranger. I stepped aside wordlessly. She entered, eyes scanning my modest apartment with that same look of barely concealed disapproval I'd grown accustomed to over the years. "Would you like some coffee?" I offered. "No thank you. I can't stay long. Richard is taking the kids sledding." Of course. My time allowance with my daughter was precisely measured, scheduled between more important family activities. Activities I wasn't invited to join. Zoey pulled an envelope from her purse and placed it on my coffee table. The check I'd given her. "I can't accept this," she said firmly. "Why not?" "Because it's manipulative, Mom. You're trying to make me feel guilty." I sat down slowly in my armchair, suddenly feeling every one of my 69 years. "Is that what Richard told you?" Her eyes flashed. "This isn't about Richard. This is about you making a scene, storming out of Christmas dinner." "I didn't storm out," I interrupted quietly. "I left quietly. No one even noticed I was gone. And then leaving this dramatic gesture," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. $50,000? Your last gift as a mother? What am I supposed to think?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Behind the perfect makeup and confident posture, I saw something I hadn't noticed before: fear. Zoey was afraid. "What did Richard say when you showed him the check?" I asked gently. She glanced away. "He said I should return it immediately. That you're trying to buy your way into our lives because you're jealous of what we have." "And what do you think?" Her composure faltered for a moment. I think you've always made things difficult. You never really tried to fit in with Richard's family. You show up in those outdated clothes, you talk about your library job and your budget vacations. It's embarrassing, Mom." Each word landed like a physical blow. I took a deep breath, willing my voice not to shake. "I've spent my entire life trying not to embarrass you, Zoey. I worked 2 jobs so you could have dance lessons and nice clothes. I sold our family home so you could go to your dream college. I've accepted every slight, every exclusion, every dismissal from you and Richard and his family because I thought that's what mothers do. They put their children first." "That's not fair," Zoey protested. "We invite you to holidays, where I'm seated in corners, given plastic cups instead of crystal, and told explicitly that I'm not family." The words came out sharper than I intended. Zoey's eyes narrowed. "You're twisting things." It was one comment, and I was stressed about the dinner. "When was the last time you called me just to talk?" I asked. "When did you last ask how I was doing or if I needed anything?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "Do you know I had surgery 3 months ago?" I continued quietly. Her head snapped up. "What? What surgery?" "They removed a small mass from my breast. Benign, thankfully. I was in the hospital for 2 days. Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I did. I left a message with Richard when you didn't answer your phone. He said he'd tell you." I watched the realization dawn on her face. "I guess he forgot." Zoey's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the back of the couch to steady herself. "I didn't know. There's a lot you don't know because somewhere along the way, you decided I wasn't worth knowing anymore." She stared at me, and for a moment I saw a glimmer of my little girl, the one who used to crawl into my lap after Robert died. Both of us crying, holding each other through the grief. Then her phone chimed. She glanced at it reflexively, and I watched her expression shift, harden. Richard's waiting, she said, straightening her posture. Look, I think we both need to calm down. You're clearly upset, and you're not being rational right now. I'm being more rational than I've been in 20 years, I said quietly. I'm finally seeing things clearly. Zoey picked up her purse. Keep the money, Mom. We can talk about this when you're ready to be reasonable. Maybe after the new year, when things settle down. What would being reasonable look like to you, Zoey? I asked. Continuing to accept being treated as less than? Pretending it doesn't hurt when my own daughter tells me I'm not family. She sighed heavily, the sound of someone dealing with a difficult child. If you just try harder to fit in, to not make everything about you. I'm not coming back, I said simply. Zoey froze. What? I'm not coming back to be humiliated again. If you want me in your life, it will be on terms that include basic respect. She stared at me in disbelief. You're being ridiculous. This is just another manipulation. Goodbye, Zoey, I said, standing up. I love you. I always will. But I can't do this anymore. As I showed her to the door, she turned back, eyes flashing with sudden anger. So that's it? You're abandoning your family over one comment. No, I replied softly. I'm finally accepting that I was abandoned long ago. I closed the door behind her, leaned against it, and for the first time in decades, I felt something unexpected breaking through the hurt relief. January arrived with a blanket of snow and a strange unexpected quiet in my life. No calls from Zoey. No awkward invitations to family events where I wasn't truly welcome. The silence should have devastated me, but instead I found myself breathing more easily than I had in years. With the money I had intended to give Zoey still in my account, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. I would spend some of it on myself. For decades, I had squirreled away every extra penny, denying myself even small pleasures. My wardrobe consisted of sensible clothes from discount stores. My last vacation had been a weekend trip to a nearby lake 5 years ago. I lived as if perpetually preparing for disaster, saving for a rainy day that never seemed to come. On a whim, I drove to the community center where I'd been seeing flyers for art classes for years. I'd always loved painting. In another life, before marriage and motherhood and widowhood, I dreamed of studying art. Robert had bought me a set of watercolors our first Christmas together, but they'd been packed away after Zoey was born, when there was no time for such indulgences. The winter session started last week, but you're welcome to join us, said the instructor, a woman about my age with silver hair and paint-spattered jeans. I'm Marta. That first class, I sat stiffly at my easel, painfully aware of my inadequacy among the other students who seemed to know what they were doing. My hands shook as I tried to mix colors, my brushstrokes awkward and hesitant. Loosen your grip, Marta suggested gently, demonstrating with her own brush. Let the painting breathe. By the end of that 2-hour class, I had produced a watercolor landscape that resembled something a child might paint. But as I stared at those wobbly trees and uneven horizon line, something warm unfurled in my chest. I had created something, for no one but myself. First time's always the hardest, said the woman at the easel next to mine as we cleaned our brushes. I'm Martha, by the way. Joyce, I replied, suddenly shy. A few of us usually grab coffee after class. Would you like to join us? I almost declined automatically, the way I'd grown accustomed to refusing invitations, making myself small and unobtrusive. But then I thought, why not? What was stopping me? I'd like that very much, I said. The coffee shop was warm and crowded. 5 of us squeezed around a small table. I listened more than I spoke as the others chatted about techniques and exhibits and their lives outside of art. Martha, I learned, was a retired schoolteacher. Dennis had taken up painting after his wife died. Elaine was caring for her sister with Alzheimer's. Susan was the youngest at 55, with grown children and a new grandbaby. What about you, Joyce? Martha asked. What brings you to art class? I hesitated, unused to being the center of attention. I just decided it was time to try something for myself. I said finally. Good for you, Elaine said, patting my hand. It's never too late. It was such a simple interaction, but I felt the warmth of it all the way home. These strangers had shown more interest in me in one afternoon than my own family had in years. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Art class twice a week, coffee afterward with my new acquaintances, who were rapidly becoming friends. Martha invited me to a book club. Dennis asked my opinion on a landscape he was struggling with. Susan showed me pictures of her granddaughter. One evening, as I was cleaning my brushes after class, my phone rang. Zoey's name flashed on the screen. My heart lurched, but not with the desperate hope I would have felt just a month ago. "Hello, Zoey," I answered calmly. "Mom." Her voice sounded strained. "I need to talk to you." "I'm actually out right now," I said, surprising myself with how easily the words came. "Can I call you back later?" A pause. "Out where?" "I'm at an art class," I said, feeling a small surge of pride. "Art class?" She sounded genuinely confused, as if she couldn't quite picture me having interests or activities of my own. "Yes. I've been taking watercolor lessons." Another pause. "I didn't know you painted." "There's a lot you don't know about me, Zoey," I said, not unkindly. Martha caught my eye from across the room, tapping her wrist. The others were waiting to go for coffee. "I need to go," I told Zoey. "My friends are waiting." "Friends?" The confusion in her voice deepened. "Yes. I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" I hung up before she could respond and joined the others, pushing away the small knot of guilt that tried to form in my stomach. For once, I wasn't dropping everything for Zoey. The world hadn't ended. Later that evening, as I was making tea in my kitchen, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Zoey standing there, her expression a mix of determination and uncertainty. "I was in the neighborhood," she said, though I knew perfectly well she had no reason to be near my apartment complex. I invited her in wordlessly. She perched on the edge of my couch, taking in the changes to my apartment. The small easel set up by the window, the stack of art books on the coffee table, the half-finished watercolor drying on my dining table. "You really are painting," she said, a note of surprise in her voice. "Did you think I was lying?" She flushed slightly. "No, it's different." I waited, sensing she hadn't come simply to discuss my new hobby. "Richard and I had a fight," she finally said, her voice small. I sat down across from her. "I'm sorry to hear that. It was about you, actually." She twisted her wedding ring nervously. "I found out he never told me about your surgery." "He admitted it." I said nothing, letting her continue. "He said he didn't want to stress me out during the holiday preparations. But then I started thinking about other things. Messages from you he claimed he never received. Invitations he said he passed along that I never heard about." My heart ached for her despite everything. "Zoey." "And then," she interrupted, her voice strengthening, "I asked him about Christmas, about why you left. He said you were being dramatic, that you always make everything about yourself." Her eyes met mine. "But that's not true, is it? You've never made anything about yourself." The simple recognition, after so many years of invisibility, brought tears to my eyes that I quickly blinked away. "He's been controlling my relationships for years," Zoey continued. "Not just with you. With my old college friends, with coworkers he doesn't approve of. I just never saw the pattern before." She looked around my apartment again, her gaze lingering on the painting by the window. "You seem different, Mom. Happier somehow." I considered this. "I am," I said simply. "I'm learning who I am outside of being your mother." Zoey's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know who I am outside of being Richard's wife anymore." I reached across and took her hand, feeling the tremble in her fingers. For the first time in many years, my daughter looked at me not with judgment or disappointment, but with something new: respect. February brought unusually heavy snow, transforming the city into a quiet wonderland. I found myself looking forward to my art classes more than ever, not just for the painting but for the warm circle of friendship that had formed around me. Martha had become a particular friend, inviting me to her home for dinner, introducing me to her grown children as if I were someone worth knowing. For the first time in decades, I was Joyce, not just Zoey's mother or Robert's widow, but a woman with her own interests, her own voice. Zoey and I had spoken several times since her unexpected visit. Brief calls, tentative texts. She'd even asked to see some of my paintings, and I'd sent her photos, heart in my throat as I awaited her response. "These are really good, Mom," she texted back, and those 5 simple words had filled me with a joy I couldn't quite explain. On a particularly cold Tuesday evening, I was adding finishing touches to a landscape in my living room when my phone rang. Zoey's name flashed on the screen. Mom! Her voice was tight, controlled in that way I recognized from when she was a child trying not to cry. Can I come over? Now. Of course, I said immediately. What's wrong? I'll tell you when I get there. 40 minutes later, a knock came at my door. I opened it to find Zoey standing there, snowflakes melting in her hair, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. I left him, she said simply, then burst into tears. I guided her to the couch, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders as she sobbed. When she finally calmed enough to speak, the story came out in broken pieces. I started paying more attention after our talk, she said, twisting a tissue between her fingers, to the way Richard controlled everything, who I talked to, where I went, how I spent money. He even checks my phone. Did you know that? I shook my head, though I wasn't entirely surprised. Yesterday I found emails, she continued, her voice hardening. He's been having an affair with his assistant for over a year. My heart sank. Oh, Zoey, I'm so sorry. When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it. He said, her voice caught. He said I'd become boring, that I was too focused on the kids and not enough on him. I bit back the angry words that rose to my lips. This was her pain to process, not mine to inflame. Then he said the most awful thing. She looked up at me, fresh tears welling. He said I was turning into you. I flinched, unable to hide the hurt. He meant it as an insult, Zoey continued quickly. But sitting there, listening to him try to blame me for his cheating, all I could think was that I should be so lucky, to be as strong as you, as resilient. My breath caught in my throat. After all these years of feeling invisible, inadequate in my daughter's eyes, her words were almost too much to bear. I packed a bag and took the kids to a hotel, she said. I couldn't stay there, not after everything. Where are Emma and Lucas now? I asked, suddenly worried about my grandchildren. With Richard's sister. Zoey's expression darkened. She called me this morning, said I was overreacting, that all men stray eventually. That's ridiculous, I said firmly. That's what Patricia said too, that I should just look the other way like she did with Richard's father. Zoey shook her head in disgust. It's like they all knew, Mom. They all knew he was cheating and no one told me. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I feel so stupid, she whispered. So humiliated. Everyone at the Christmas dinner probably knew. I took her hand. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Richard is the one who broke his vows, not you. She nodded, wiping her eyes. There's more. When I told him I was leaving, he threatened me. Said if I tried to divorce him, he'd make sure I got nothing. Not the house, not custody of the kids, not a penny of his money. A cold anger settled in my chest. Can he do that? I don't know. His family has a lot of influence, a lot of connections. His father plays golf with half the judges in the county. She looked up at me, fear evident in her eyes. What if he takes my children, Mom? He won't, I said with more certainty than I felt. We won't let him. The word hung between us, a bridge slowly being rebuilt. I don't know what to do, Zoey admitted. I don't have anywhere to go. The hotel is so expensive, and I can't access our joint accounts anymore. Richard froze them. Stay here, I said without hesitation. You and the kids. I have the pull-out sofa, and we can make a bed for the children in my room. She looked around my small apartment. Are you sure? It's not very big. It's big enough, I assured her. And it's just temporary until you figure things out. She hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. Later that night, after Zoey had fallen asleep on my couch, I sat by the window watching the snow fall, thinking about the strange turns life takes. A month ago, I'd been utterly alone, cut off from my only family. Now my daughter was here, turning to me in her hour of need. I thought about Richard's threat to take everything from Zoey, to use his family's influence against her. The old me would have been terrified, powerless against such connections and wealth. But something had changed in me these past few weeks. I wasn't that same compliant, invisible woman anymore. I still had the $50,000. I'd almost given away. Money that could help Zoey fight for her children, for her dignity. Money that could be a bridge to a new beginning for both of us. More importantly, I had found my voice. I wouldn't be silenced again, not by Richard, not by his family, not by anyone. My phone buzzed with a text from Martha. How are you holding up with the snow? Need anything? I smiled, typing back. My daughter's staying with me for a while. Could use some advice on good divorce lawyers. Her response came quickly. My nephew is one of the best in the city. I'll call you tomorrow. I set my phone down, feeling a strength I'd forgotten I possessed. For years I'd believed I was alone, that I had nothing to offer. Now I realized that wasn't true. I had resources, financial, emotional, and social, that I'd been too beaten down to recognize. Zoey stirred on the couch, murmuring something in her sleep. I gently adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, remembering how I used to do the same when she was small. We'll be okay, I whispered to her and to myself. We'll face this together. And for the first time in years I truly believed it. 6 months can change everything. As summer bloomed across the city, I stood in the community center gallery, hardly believing the moment had arrived. My watercolor landscapes, 5 of them framed and displayed on the white wall before me, were part of the senior art program's exhibition. They're beautiful, Joyce, Martha said, squeezing my arm. You should be proud. I was proud, not just of the paintings but of the journey they represented. Each brushstroke was a small act of reclaiming myself. Grandma! Emma's voice called out as she darted through the crowd, her 7-year-old energy impossible to contain. There are cookies at the back. Can I have one? Just one before dinner, I answered, smoothing her hair. Behind her, Lucas followed more slowly, his serious 9-year-old face considering each painting with careful attention. I like the one with the lake best, he declared, pointing to my favorite piece. A scene from the cabin we'd rented for a weekend in April, our first family trip in years. Me too, I agreed, ruffling his hair. The past 6 months hadn't been easy. Zoe's divorce from Richard had turned ugly fast, just as we'd feared. He'd used every connection, every resource to intimidate her, to wear her down. But we'd found strength neither of us knew we possessed. Martha's nephew had proven to be an exceptional lawyer, specialized in high-conflict divorces. My $50,000, the money I'd once offered as a desperate plea for my daughter's love, became the investment in her freedom instead, funding the legal battle when Richard cut off her access to all their accounts. The small apartment that had once felt like a symbol of my diminished life became a sanctuary for Zoey and the children. Cramped, yes, but filled with laughter, tears, healing, and the messy, wonderful reality of family. Real family, bound not by obligation but by love and mutual respect. Mom! Zoe's voice broke into my thoughts as she approached, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in years. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup that had been her armor in Richard's world. Instead, she wore a simple sundress, her hair loose around her shoulders. Sorry I'm late. The meeting with the realtor ran long. The settlement had finally come through last month. Not the fortune Richard had initially tried to deny her, but enough for Zoey to put a down payment on a small house not far from my apartment. A fresh start. Did you get the keys? I asked. She grinned, dangling a keyring. We can move in next week. That's wonderful news. A shadow crossed her face. I wish we didn't have to leave your place though. You're not going far, I reminded her. And you need your own space, especially now that you're starting your new job. After years of being a stay-at-home mother, carefully managed by Richard, Zoey had reclaimed her own career aspirations. She'd accepted a position at a local nonprofit, work that lit her up in a way I hadn't seen since she was young. We'll still have Sunday dinners at your place though, right? She asked, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. Every Sunday, I promised. And I'm still picking up the kids from school on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Our new routine, our new life was taking shape day by day, each of us finding our footing after the earthquake that had shattered our old existence. Mrs. Holloway? A woman I didn't recognize approached, elegant in a silk blouse and tailored pants. I'm Amanda Chun from the River Gallery downtown. I wanted to compliment you on your work. The light in your landscapes is quite extraordinary. I blinked in surprise. Thank you. We're putting together a showcase of emerging senior artists next spring. Would you be interested in submitting some pieces for consideration? My mind went blank. A real gallery? Me? Zoey stepped in smoothly. She'd be honored. May I take your card for her? As Amanda walked away, I turned to my daughter in shock. A gallery showcase? I'm not ready for that. Of course you are, Zoey said firmly. Your work is beautiful, Mom. It deserves to be seen. Before I could respond, the center's director clinked a glass for attention, gathering everyone for the official welcome. As the small crowd quieted, I saw a familiar face entering at the back of the room. Patricia, Richard's mother, stood stiffly by the door, her expression unreadable. Behind her was Richard's sister Caroline. My heart sank. Had they come to cause trouble? To ruin this moment for Zoey? Zoey followed my gaze, her body tensing as she spotted her former in-laws. The children, thankfully, were distracted by Martha, who was showing them how to make proper punch cup sandwiches. Patricia made her way through the crowd, Caroline trailing behind. When they reached us, an awkward silence fell. I hope we're not intruding, Patricia said stiffly. Caroline saw the exhibition announcement in the paper. My paintings are hardly newsworthy, I said cautiously. Nevertheless, Patricia cleared her throat. We wanted to see them, and to see how Zoey and the children are doing. Zoey's chin lifted slightly. We're doing well, thank you. Another awkward pause. Then Caroline stepped forward, her usual haughtiness replaced by something that looked almost like embarrassment. Your work is lovely, Joyce, she said quietly. I didn't know you were an artist. There's a lot you didn't know about me, I replied, not unkindly. Patricia's gaze moved from my paintings to Zoey, then to the children laughing with Martha across the room. Something shifted in her expression. A softening perhaps, or a realization. Richard has moved to Chicago, she said abruptly. With his assistant. I wish them well, Zoey said, with a dignity that made my heart swell with pride. Patricia nodded, then turned to me. You were right at Christmas. About a lot of things. I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner. The apology, however oblique, left me momentarily speechless. Before I could respond, Emma spotted her former grandmother and came running over, Lucas following more cautiously. Grandma Patricia, Emma exclaimed. Did you see Grandma Joyce's paintings? They're the prettiest ones here. Patricia knelt down, a genuine smile softening her face. They certainly are. Your grandmother is very talented. She's teaching me to paint too, Emma continued excitedly. And she makes the best pancakes, and she reads us 3 stories every night, not just one. A look passed between Patricia and me, understanding perhaps or recognition. The measuring stick she'd always used to judge me had been the wrong one entirely. Later, as the evening wound down and we prepared to leave for our celebratory dinner, Zoey linked her arm through mine.